right, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Damn You Hollywood. I am Robert Winfrey, and we are absent one Mark Radulich this evening. Just some scheduling issues. Mark is currently recording a TV party for The Mandalorian, which I could sum up in about 5 words. It's caricatures shooting laser beams at each other. But it does have Werner Herzog, so I suppose there's that. But on the plus side, you don't have to just listen to me talk to myself this particular evening. You will have joining me a fellow kind of history nerd along the same lines and longtime friend of the show. Also one of the few people I tend to delve into technical martial arts discussions with. Andrew Graham is with us. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing very good, Robert. Yourself?
I'm not too bad. I'm still, dodging metaphorical bullets because it's that time of the year.
No, fair enough. However, I just realized I'm actually wearing a Fight Rattle Fight T-shirt right now, so Mark is technically here.
He's here in spirit, sure.
Yep.
Before we get into the movie proper, announcement that has to be made, or Mark will get mad at me. For those of you who enjoy our shows, this current feed will essentially discontinue the end of the week, basically. All of our content is going to be moving over to the W2M podcasting network. That is number 2. Almost pulled a Jeff Goldblum there. Celebrity Jeopardy references. It's W, the number 2, M. That should get you any of the networks. That's where all of our shows are going to be going forward for a variety of reasons. So that's where you can find us in the going forward. This particular feed is not really going to be updating anymore, so we hope you'll make that minor transition. Most of our stuff has been cross-promoted there for the last several months, so just wanted to get that out of the way. And I have to say this again because I have to give Mark grief in one form or another, but on this show we will be reviewing the recently released epic war movie 1917, directed by Sam Mendes. And Mark has a really interesting habit of finding ways or excuses to not review some of the things that I really want to talk about. Sometimes that's horror movies, sometimes that's stuff like this. Now, in fairness, I understand, stuff happens. I'm not accusing Mark of deliberately malingering in this instance. But there's something of a trend there, so thankfully Andrew's here, and we'll get to talk about this particular, I'm going to say it this way because I think it's accurate, this particular triumph of technical filmmaking. So we'll have a lot of that, and Mark should be back next week. When we're back to our regular Tuesday night slot, Mark should be back kind of on the regular. Alright, Andrew, you kind of had agreed to be in on this from the beginning, so tell me, before we jump into the filmmaking and plot synopsis and whatnot, you're kind of not just a history nerd, but you've got a bit of a, how do I phrase this? You're kind of a military history buff. So what kind of brought you to saving my bacon from talking to myself for the next hour and a half or so about this movie?
Well, military history buff's a pretty good way to put it. I did quite a bit of it when I was in university, and since then I've kind of kept up with everything. Interestingly enough, probably I've spent more time since university reading about World War One than World War Two, which is where I did a lot of my time at university. And this one came up, and I'd heard a lot of the buzz about it. I'm not gonna lie, I was slightly skeptical of this movie when I'd first seen it, and we'll get to that in a while, and as to why, and it has something to do with a little bit of set dressing, but we'll get to that one a little bit later. But I continued to hear the buzz. I think right around the time, I mean, I hadn't seen this until after it won the Golden Globe, but I'd read enough reviews to say that this is a really solid piece of work and a really innovative way of telling this particular story, and I definitely had to go see it. I'm glad I did.
Yeah, ditto. For the record, Mark did give me a couple of things he wanted read on. The first of which being he is glad that he saw that I made him see this movie, basically, even though he's not here to discuss it. I tend to think of my contributions to this to the schedule that we have here. A little bit like the films of Werner Herzog. Roger Ebert, I think it was, has a great quote about the movies that Herzog makes. They're never boring or forgettable. Even his failures are noteworthy and spectacular in some respect. And my history of movies suggested for this podcast is a bit iffy, but I think the only one I've suggested that wound up being just a dud in terms of not just financially, but we had nothing to discuss. I think this only happened once. So I'm confident enough in my batting average as far as at least interesting things that we get to talk about here.
Which one was that?
Pet Sematary.
I never listened to that one. The horror's not in my wheelhouse either.
We spent more time talking about it than we did about Pets.
Fair enough.
The movie's just, it's so unbelievably bland and forgettable, which is a crying shame. And for the record, the marketing team for Pet Sematary, especially the people who put together the trailer, they deserve gobs of credit because they made it seem like it was going to be much, much better than it was. Okay, as for the plot of this movie, for 1917, it is set in April. They give a specific date. I forget which date it was. In 1917, and I have to say this from a technical standpoint because it bears noting very early. This entire movie is essentially presented as one continuous shot. The only thing that would look like a traditional cut occurs when the character we're following is rendered unconscious. That's it. Other than that, this is presented as one single shot, which is it's a remarkable thing to have done. We open on the Western Front in northern France, where the two soldiers we follow for a chunk of this are first roused from their slumber. A couple of lance corporals, Blake and Schofield. They're told by a mustachioed Colin Firth that they have to take a message to a couple of battalions of soldiers who have advanced. The second battalion, of this regiment. That they are planning an attack for the next morning that, on the surface, looks like a good idea, but with some of the new reconnaissance photos that this General Aaron Moore has, they've revealed that the Germans, in fact, have not been falling back willy-nilly, but have retreated to a very, very fortified position in hopes of goading an attack like this that they can then counterattack. One of the men in this battalion is the older brother of Blake, and this is presented more as motivation for for the character to be, okay, no, you've got your brother here. You have more skin in the game than just following orders, so you're more likely to continue on through with this mission. The two of them are given a brief outline about where they should go. They head to the front line. They're able to cross no man's land, utilizing information that was given them that this is where the Germans have pulled back from. There's no one on the other side to shoot at you. They head across no man's land, traverse through the German trench sequence. A very large rat accidentally triggers a tripwire, causes an explosion. The two men are able to race through through the series of tunnels, escape out the other side, move through the other side of these German lines, continue on their way. They wind up witnessing a dogfight after they stop to investigate a farmhouse. They see a dogfight between a couple of airplanes, one of which is shot down, nearly crashes into them. They pull the German pilot from the burning airplane, and rather than simply execute the man on the spot, Blake sends Schofield to get water from a nearby pump. As Schofield is over there, Blake is summarily stabbed by this ungrateful aviator. Schofield kills the German, winds up holding Blake in his arms as he dies, but is somewhat compelled to continue the mission. He is shortly thereafter picked up by a passing military unit who he hitches a ride with basically until they get to this other city, Ekusamen, where normally the rest of this unit wants to cross, but the bridge has basically the first bridge they come to has been demolished to the point where the vehicles cannot cross. But Schofield kind of makes his way over. Halfway along the way, he starts to be he's shot at from a nearby building. He's able to return fire, kills this particular German soldier, but is very nearly shot in the head, and is rendered unconscious for several hours. When he regains himself, he resumes his mission. Encounters a French woman in this city because he's in the town he was aiming for. That was going to be his landmark for the next part of his journey. Encounters a French woman because, that's just what you do, I imagine. Like, if there's one thing in this movie that becomes a bit tropey, it's this scene where he encounters this French woman. Because, I had flashbacks to Snoopy and the Red Baron. Like, that's where my head went when he stumbled across her. Like, of course, there's a French peasant girl. He again continues on his way, winds up strangling one German officer while a German soldier, while another is unbelievably drunk. Jumps into a river, is carried further south towards his destination. He does eventually encounter the unit in question. Has to make a really almost hair-raising run laterally across the line of charging people, the line of other charging soldiers, delivers his message to the colonel in charge of this group, played by... There's a few characters here that we're going to touch on in more detail in a bit. But he delivers it to Benedict Cumberbatch, is able to call off the assault in time after just one wave had been sent over the wall, or out of the trench. He goes to the casualty area to try and find Blake's older brother. Does find him, relays the information of his younger brother's death. He is able to complete his mission, relays that information, and then, much like we begin the movie, he goes to sit with his back to a tree, closes his eyes, and is able to finally rest again. There's a lot in there that is not going to do this movie justice if all you do have is a plot synopsis, because a lot of the technique that goes into this is what makes it profoundly special, along with some of the performances, which are quite good. So, Andrew, I've talked a fair bit now. Where do you want to start with this? What stands out to you, good, bad, or otherwise?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, most of what I'm going to have to say is somewhere in the range of good to glowing. I could not get over this movie after I got home from seeing it. Why don't we just start with something really simple? Let's go with at least one of the things that struck me right off the bat. Let's go with set design, production design, which is, the way I put it is that I have never seen a movie with such loving set design for sets that are only on scene for 5 minutes apiece. To kind of set the stage for the start of this, you actually see, these two guys get rousted. They get brought to the command bunker. Then they have to walk all the way through an entire trench system to the front lines, crawl over through no man's land and into a German trench and into their dugouts. And for as much study as I have done on World War I, there's a great book I just read called The Secret Life of Soldiers, talking about life in the trenches. This movie couldn't have nailed it any better if it tried. From a structural point of view, when you're going through the British trenches, you see that there's actually several lines of trenches that you walk through. You see a lot of the kind of the improvised things that they've built, a lot of the dugouts that they slept in, things like that. Once you get into no man's land, you see the utter, horror show that it was, with things like the soldiers using corpses as kind of waypoint markers and things like that. It's going through no man's land is pretty harrowing. And then even getting over to the German side, when you see that they've built this much more, this much cleaner, much neater, much more orderly trench and make all the jokes you want about the Germans that you can. But one of the things about this war is that the British never put a lot of time into their trenches because they were always hoping they were going to be up open into open field again, and the Germans were building everything to kind of stay to it. And maybe I'll do a quick aside on a little bit about the context for this movie. Um, so in terms of historical, I'd probably say this is a more historically authentic movie than I will say historically accurate.
I'd agree with
So
that.
kind of the like none of the characters existed in this movie. The circumstances did. So basically, in late 1916, early 1917, the Germans staged this massive pullback into this new fortified line that was called the Hindenburg Line, and it was exactly as described in the movie. It was concrete bunkers, pillboxes, everything like that. Imagine kind of the structures you might see the first 5 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. But basically, the reason they did this was because they had these two. Their line had been kind of strung out. It had gotten longer, and you need more people to front that. And basically, what they were doing is they were pulling that back to try and tighten up their line and free up troops to either keep defending the Western Front, which they just wanted to hold on to, or alternatively go send them to the Eastern Front where they were still fighting the Russians. By the time they finished this, they actually freed up 13 to 14 extra divisions. And depending on how you look at it, a division's about 10 to 15,000 men. So you can kind of imagine what kind of difference that made. Was it the trap that it was kind of pitched as to lure the Allies into something? Not really. I mean, they definitely what they ended up doing was still fairly effective because of how secret they had managed to pull this off. It actually screwed up a good portion of a lot of the kind of the Allies' plans for that year. Um, this movie's probably set about a month later than when this event actually happened. It finished up about March, and by about April of 1917, both the British and the French were actually readying pretty major offensives in the area. The British one happened was called the Battle of Arras, which is at the north end of where this pullback happened. And part of that, take your drinks, everybody. Canadian fact time. This was the battle that produced the siege and the victory at Vimy Ridge by the First Canadian Army. So, yeah, I mean the production design, the uniforms, the feel, the
I
look,
think
everything
the
was just
Canadian
spot
Army
on.
got a shout out in this movie, didn't they? Isn't there a
Uh,
line in there about where something along the lines of, I think it's right near the end when they mention, "Oh, we're seeing flares. That must mean the Newfoundland guys have reached their lines."
Correct. They did shout out to the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, which actually wasn't part of Canada at the time.
Oh yeah, that would have still been British technically, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was kind of its own. It was kind of its own dominion at that point. So it was more. It was kind of like Texas was until it joined the United States,
Okay.
and they didn't join until 1949. I mean, Royal Newfoundland Regiment is very famous within Canada. They had probably if you've ever heard of the Battle of the Somme, go look them up during that. They had some of the heaviest losses that day, but yeah, this is right in the area where you would have seen British, you would have seen Canadians, you would have seen all the other Commonwealth troops and everything like that. But like I said, the production design, kind of the look and the feel of the movie was pretty much spot on. My only criticism about anything in kind of this aspect was probably more towards sound design. And at that point in the war, you had so much artillery going off, you would have always heard in the background. That said, I can live with that because gorgeous score by Thomas Newman instead. That was kind of really haunting and really interesting in terms of it wasn't tied to it wasn't forced to be tied to the period that it was working in. So it was kind of pretty much in line with anything else he had done. But in terms of that, it's pretty outstanding. I could give a lecture for an hour on a lot of this stuff. So we'll just end it there.
Yeah, I agree. I think World War One is it's a topic that I think doesn't get as much attention as it should. It is one of the most misunderstood wars that we've had. In fact, to the point that I've heard it argued, I'm not sure how much I agree with it, but the very notion of kind of like separating World War One and World War Two is in some respects like a very almost American thing, and I don't mean that derisively, but The United States only entered World War II for the last couple of years of that conflict. Ditto World War One and Two. We came into the party somewhat late on both of those.
Well, actually, if I remember right, the American. So if this happened on, if this movie was on April 6th, the United States actually joined 3 days later.
Yeah, this would have been very close to that, but I just mean historically, we enter World War One right near the end, World War Two right near the end, and it's more helpful to kind of consider those conflicts not as separate events, but as one kind of long, drawn-out conflict over the course of that, 20 to 30 year period than it is to consider them two isolated incidents. I think one of the things that I kind of came away from this movie very impressed by, I mean, there's a lot, but I agree with you about the set design for just, hey, let's create something that is very authentic, very detail-oriented, and they're going to walk by it in like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of that. There's a lot of scenes in this movie that you almost... It's a difficult thing because much as you would kind of like to have a wide shot, it would also ruin a lot of what the movie does. The couple of, the closest we get to wide shots in this movie, they are still very impressive. In the trench warfare, the replication of the trenches, very, very accurate. This movie does something that I think a lot of the genuinely great movies that take the same kind of not just like adventure approach do. They take a lot of the kind of the characters that you meet along the way, that you meet very briefly, but within that brief interaction, they're able to get across everything you need to know about the character. And that's a really difficult thing to do, especially to do correctly. To just, Colin Firth's character is on screen for not a lot of time, but between what he says, how he says it, and the physical acting that goes into it, it tells you everything you need to know about this guy. Ditto, Andrew Scott, who plays a kind of battle-weary lieutenant that they wind up meeting up with very briefly. Mark Strong, who's captain in the one of the captains for the unit that Schofield hitches a ride with. In short screen time, but is able to convey everything that you need to, both about the character and what that character means to the story they're telling. And I think the highlight of that is probably Benedict Cumberbatch as Colonel Mackenzie, because there's an exchange when Schofield last sees Mark Strong's character. Strong just says, if you do make it to Mackenzie, and when you give him the orders, make sure there are witnesses. And Schofield's a little taken aback, but it's like, these are direct orders from the general, and I know. But some men, and I think the exact line from Strong is, some men just love the fight. And it would have been very easy to turn Mackenzie into a very stereotypical bloodthirsty commander, and that's not what he is, thankfully. As he's willing to dismiss what he deems, pointless concerns. In fact, the first time Schofield shows up with, I have orders to stop this attack, his response is, I'm not very frustrated. I'm not going to wait for fog. I'm not going to wait for rain. I'm not going to wait for a motion 60 miles further south. I have the enemy on the run. We are pushing forward. He stops when he's told, no, the Germans kind of want you to. You have incomplete tactical information. And he then kind of reluctantly calls off the attack, and he has, I think, one of the best lines, if you want insight into that character. He just kind of laments to Schofield, in about a week they'll send another messenger with saying attack at dawn.
Yeah.
And then dismisses him.
I even kind of enjoyed that line, the way he delivered, no, fuck off, Lance Corporal.
Yeah. And that's it's something about there's a lot of war movies, or kind of like the epic war adventure movie, that tend to get that kind of thing more right than other movies. That just you have a short window to look at this character, so having the right actor, having the right writing, and just being able to cram a ton of information, keep it all relevant, and do it in a very succinct manner. It's not an easy thing to do, and this movie does it very, very well. In addition to a lot of other things it does well. You mentioned the score. I really liked it. I'm pretty sure this got nominated for Best Original Score. If it didn't, it should have. This is a really
It did.
Yeah, this is a really sound score. The acting all the way around in this movie is very good. George McKay, the guy who plays Schofield, does a lot of really good work here. And different things will affect people differently, but that final scene when he has to actually tell the older Lieutenant Blake about the death of his younger brother, the way that scene played out, I think that's, of all the scenes in this movie, that's the one that got me.
Oh yeah, and for the amount of time that you see both, and again, to pick out, Richard Madden there, like what he brings to that scene is so good.
It's genuinely heartbreaking to see him handle it the way he does too. Like he doesn't. If you see scenes something like this that are set in different wars, people tend to bring different sensibilities to them or have different assumptions about them. He's very deeply affected. But he doesn't collapse. He doesn't break down wailing. He is profoundly grief-stricken, but he does not become an apoplectic, inconsolable mess.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting looking at these characters. Like I'd say with the exception of probably Richard Madden's character, who I read as being a newer lieutenant, I think I read a lot of this is a reaction to the exhaustion of war at this point. So look at Colin Firth. You can make as many comments about the perception of World War I generals being out of touch and uncaring for their soldiers, and they made a lot of mistakes, and they were definitely trying to fight the last war. But I think a lot of these guys, as human beings, felt everything they were doing. You look at Andrew Scott, Warner Brothers, please cast him as the Joker. But he's somebody.
Andrew Scott is my second favorite Moriarty.
Who's your first favorite?
This might be somewhat controversial to Sherlock nerds. I say that lovingly. I really like Jared Harris from Game of Shadows.
Really?
He's my that movie is very flawed in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But Jared Harris as Moriarty in that movie reminds me a little bit of like Philip Seymour Hoffman in Mission Impossible 3. He just swallows the screen when he's on it.
Okay, I'm going to have to rewatch it because I don't remember. Jared Harris, great actor. Absolutely loved him in Chernobyl. I didn't love him in that role. And maybe it's because I'd already seen the early seasons of Andrew Scott's Moriarty. But anyway, so his character story, we're totally going off on a tangent. So mark your bingo cards, folks. But like his Lieutenant Leslie, like he's kind of been in the trenches long enough, and he is basically at the stage of screw it, I don't care. Mark Strong's character, and these are really subtle things, and they're not clearly laid out. Like Mark Strong's character, if you look at him, I'd be hard pressed to say that he had a weapon on him. Like he had his walking stick.
He had the swagger stick, but yeah, I don't think he even had a pistol.
He might have had a pistol under his coat. But this was no kidding. There were British officers during the First World War, at least in the starting part. I don't know if they would have hung on to this by 1917, but there were ones who genuinely believed that it was not their role to actually carry weapons and fight, but to lead and direct their troops and be with their troops in the battlefield, but not necessarily be actually pulling the trigger. And I mean, I kind of read a little bit of that in his character, and then finally there's Colonel Mackenzie, or I think he might have even been a lieutenant colonel, but if he was a battalion commander.
He's
but
just credited as full colonel, so.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and watch the movie and see if I can read his shoulder pips to figure out what that is. Unfortunately, British ranking systems at this time, and actually British ranking systems still, are a little bit hard to read right off the bat. But anyway, I mean, he and I think you're dead on correct that they gave a lot of depth to a character who could have very easily been a straight black hat. And I mean, I don't think this is a guy who is motivated to do this for, glory or anything like that. I think my read of him was like, I just want to get this bloody war over with, and we finally have the chance to.
Yeah, his statement that was very adroitly used in the trailer was, there's only one way this ends, and that's last man standing. I agree with you. I think he's very tired of the war, and he's just very willing to make what he deems the necessary sacrifice to end it, because he knows war's a brutal thing. He's not blind to that.
That, and I mean, from like an institutional point of view, like in 1917, you were starting to get the war was starting to devolve in some ways, where there was more latitude given at a battalion level to try and act, and at a battalion and a brigade level to try and do some of these things, and across the armies, just because they were starting to figure out it's like, no, you can't go marching all across the field at the same time. You need to start looking at what we would kind of recognize modern day as small unit tactics.
Yeah, I mean, World War I, just again, as a generalized conflict, is a very fascinating one in a lot of those respects, just because it is like the great clash between old world military philosophy and industrial reality.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons the Germans had as much success as they did early on, and, well, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was the fact that, I mean, the German Empire, when they launched World War I, was still relatively young, and if you look at the sequence of events that led up to the creation of the German state, a lot of that springs out of the old Prussian Empire, and the two primary architects of that, famously being, of course, Otto von Bismarck and I can't remember because Bismarck was a diplomat. There was a military general.
Who am I thinking of? I know exactly who you're talking about. Was it Moltke the Elder?
Yeah, that's it. Something. It sounds like that. Very similar. His son was one of the high-ranking generals in World War I and screwed up royally.
Wait a second, let me just read this. Yep, I think you're right. Yeah, it was Helmut von Moltke the Elder.
Yeah. He had taken a lot of lessons from the American Civil War, actually, about how we decentralizing elements of the army, in what slightly larger than we do now, but small unit tactics, being able to break up, giving more autonomy to individual units. And you can see some of that. You can see the Allied perspective start to catch up to that as World War I progresses.
Yeah. And then, his son was...
Also, for those of you who may not know, when they mention, there's the dead horses as landmarks, cavalry charges were still a thing in World War I. For as unbelievably tragic as they were attempted a few different times. And horses themselves were still faster and in some respects more reliable, depending on terrain, than a lot of automated vehicles in some respects.
Yeah.
So,
and actually, the main thing they were used for, I mean, it was something that you can probably have a bit of an argument about. But the scene when they're all on all the trucks, like, it was still largely a horse-drawn war in terms of, and I think they even showed in No Man's Land, is that those horses are there's a cart right beside it, so you were still getting a lot of your artillery, your ammo, your supplies, all being hauled by horse-drawn carriages, just because they could handle the mud a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually one case where later on in the war, in the spring of 1918, after the Russians had surrendered, basically the Germans took everyone they had over there and actually managed to get into a pretty ugly breakout. And at that point, the during that offensive, the British actually countercharged and actually made effective use of cavalry when German troops were in the open.
Yeah, I imagine one of the last times a cavalry charge was actually effective in the in the military sense.
Yeah, and I mean on the other end, I think the other thing that finally came of age at that point was what were called machine gun cars, which was basically just the cars of the day with heavy machine guns mounted on them that were basically just driving around and engaging Germans where they could.
Yeah, and we also did see they walked by one of the tanks, I think, when crossing either no man's land or just on
Yep.
the other side of the German lines. Which, and another great technological advent that came out of World War One was, hey, tanks. Yeah, these things are only going to radically change the shape of warfare forever.
Yeah, I mean these days now, I mean talking about cavalry, but I mean if you hear about something being a cavalry regiment or a horse regiment in the Commonwealth armies today, it's a tank regiment now.
Yeah, most of the mounted units at this point in time refer to heavy armor.
Yep.
I think that was adopted, like, I can't speak for the Canadian Army, but I think, like, post Vietnam was when that shift got really made, because I know in Vietnam, a lot of there were cavalry units that were just, you know, regular army, but because they were moved and deployed rapidly via helicopter, the helicopter kind of replaced the horse, but they were still referred to as cavalry units.
Yeah, for the Commonwealth armies, that happened between the First and Second World War. So all the horse regiments or all the dragoons or everything like that all became some form of armor between wars.
Your bit of random historical trivia aside, there's a really, I think, kind of interesting line of demarcation when it comes to this movie from a craft perspective. Everything prior to his encounter with the German sniper when he's rendered unconscious, and then everything after. And I don't mean this to be negative. I think it's a very deliberate choice by the filmmakers. Everything prior to that moment is extremely grounded. It feels, and this is not to say everything after doesn't necessarily feel this way, but everything prior to that feels very grounded. Everything after that, from him waking up in that building and looking out to see the illumination flares going off and against the backdrop of this very much burning city. Everything after that moment takes on an almost surrealistic quality that I've actually enjoyed from an aesthetic perspective. Almost to the point where when he stumbles across this bit of the regiment that he's looking for, they're all sitting around while one member of the group is singing I forget the name of the song, but it's a very famous like Irish ballad.
Let me see if I can find. I know exactly which one you're talking about, though.
Very famous song, and it's like might be Crossing Over, something like that. Anyway, and there's a scene, there's a shot where he sits down and leans against a tree, and the camera like pans around, goes out away from him, kind of through some of the troops, and then circles back. And there's one shot of one guy sitting there that really looked. I might have to double check this at some point in the future, but it actually looks like his companion Blake, who had died. And it almost, again, it lends this like surrealistic quality where you're not sure if he's actually alive or dead at this point, and this isn't just some deeply symbolic representation of him starting to cross over. And again, that entire latter half, like post his unconsciousness, has some really, really like deep symbology if you get into it, and it does make me wonder if we're not going to start to see people crop up, kind of making the argument that no, he didn't actually succeed. He died. He and that German sniper killed each other. And what happens after that is more like, again, metaphorical and symbolic than realistic and literal. So, and it's a very, I think it's a deliberate choice by the filmmakers, and it worked for me as far as just like a generalized film technique. I enjoyed that shift. But it does kind of bear noting that there is that change a little bit from, and the music goes, the sound, the score goes along with this. Elements of the cinematography kind of go along with that. It's a really, really well conceptualized and executed bit of filmmaking to kind of leave, maybe leave that bit of interpretation open to that degree.
Oh, I agree with you on that one. I can definitely see where someone might go down that same road, but I definitely starting on the starting after he wakes up and the illumination flares are going on. Like, I mean, that's just a Sam Mendes and his collaborators in terms of cinematography and that have a great eye for pulling in really interesting uses of color and light and shadow and things like that. And I mean, one of the more interesting things when you get into a lot of the art coming out of World War One, on some of it is a very grounded movie, but it also does have some of those kind of artistic flourishes, and a lot of pieces of those art have some of those drastic colors and some of those very clear angles and everything at the time. And I definitely didn't read it as he had passed on. I think there was definitely a bit of a surreal moment for him where he had, between the exhaustion, between the head injury that he had just had, and that he was just kind of just maybe seeing things, and that was not an uncommon thing from accounts of the First World War, where people would see all kinds of strange things. There were a number of ghost stories that came out of the war, things like that.
Well, and not to mention this going in. This was not depicted in this film in particular, but with all the chemicals that were thrown around in World War One, if you got away with just hallucinations, you were probably lucky.
Oh yeah, and I mean I'm trying to remember how much was used in 1917, but we would have also been looking at a chemical environment at this point. I mean, like this might seem as a shock for some people, but I remember being shocked when I heard it. Is that when you get to the last 3 months of World War One, it is a chemical environment. There is gas being used every day on every battle.
Yeah, it got
By
crazy
both
towards
sides.
the end. Trying to think if there was anything else that really stuck out to me. I love the single take style of filmmaking. It does always make me wonder if oh no, I can't remember the director. Gonna have to look this up. 1 second. I always wonder. Yeah, that was okay. I always wonder if Park Chan Wook, the director of the original Korean Old Boy, knew what he was going to start when he shot that hallway fight scene.
I think so.
Because
I think.
that one scene, glorious scene, by the way. I mean, the don't look up Spike Lee's remake. It's not nearly as good. It's like bad in many places. But if you see the original Korean Old Boy, or you could just look up the hallway fight in that movie, and you'll see it immediately. But the inspiration that so many other filmmakers have drawn from that one scene and what they have expounded on, and what they've expanded it to, this movie is kind of, I don't know that it's the apex of that, but it's certainly about as far to the logical conclusion of, hey, I wonder if we could do that as you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. There's another movie that took it a step further by going all first person for one movie. I haven't seen it. Hardcore Henry. I never saw it.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was any good.
the whole movie done from a first person perspective thing is a little bit iffy for me. But if we're just talking again single shots like that, you know, Daredevil, very famously, the television series or the Netflix series had at least one major single shot fight sequence slash set piece in each season that that just escalated each time.
Oh, the season three one in the prison was so good it wasn't even funny.
Like from a filmmaking perspective, that's the best. I think from an action perspective, I still lean towards the one in season two.
Yeah, and
And
that one's not a true one shot. They
I
hit a
know
cut.
it's close, but it's not. And then I mean the first one is still probably the one that emotionally resonates is the one from season one.
Yep.
And Sam Mendes as well when he directed Spectre, the
Spectre.
most recent James Bond movie. The entire opening action sequence of that is presented as a single continuous shot.
Yes, I remember that.
And for all the other flaws that Spectre had as a film, that opening bit was really well done. So this it works really well in this movie, in particular. So Mendes he's not necessarily one of the guys who might be up there actually. Now that I think about it, I have four I think directors whose just name alone attached to something makes me interested in it. More than anything else, are like independent of other factors. And Mendes is rapidly becoming one of them. I mean, I think the closest thing you have to what's the closest thing you have to a bad movie on his resume?
I'm looking at it right now. I mean, I haven't seen everything on here. Interestingly enough, I didn't realize that.
It probably is Spectre, actually.
Yeah, actually, that's probably not too far off. The other interesting one on his resume here, just from kind of a war movie point of view and the canon of those, is Jarhead.
Yeah, the 2005 Jake Gyllenhaal vehicle.
Which I actually rather, once you get over the fact that the marketing for that movie was completely messed up, I actually really enjoy that movie unto itself and kind of where it goes.
Yeah, as a study of, boy, we were sure so. It's one of the I almost wonder if the marketing for that wasn't a deliberate misdirect, kind of the same way that they set up for their narrative to be like, military service is this, and no, really, it's this.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know that had everyone. Because I remember it was where Jesus Walks, the Kanye West song on there, and they had A-10s flying over and everybody yelling, and it's like, this is gonna be awesome, and then it's like,
and then
this wasn't what I was expecting, but it's really good.
Then it's just basically what the Gulf War was.
Yeah.
And yeah. So there's that. I mean, Road to Perdition's a really good movie.
Oh, Road to Perdition's so good, it's not even funny.
I mean, that's one of the Jude Law gives one of those like great unrecognizable performances. Like if you just put a picture of that guy up and you didn't know it was Jude Law, you might not recognize him.
And actually, thinking about that now, that has Daniel Craig in it as well.
Yeah, briefly. Oh, not briefly.
Yep.
No, he's the bonehead son of Paul Newman.
He is, yes.
I mean, this guy debuted with American Beauty. I mean,
I've never actually seen that, and Kevin Spacey will probably have me not be in a rush to see it anytime soon.
I mean, I don't find Kevin Spacey that off-putting. I mean,
Yeah, that's fair.
Put it like this. I have long since gotten over the reality that people who create interesting works of art are generally terrible people.
That's fair.
If I only, consumed art, be that, television, film, novels, whatever, by people who were, not only good people, but whose, ethics and worldview and morality lined up with my own, I would have an unbelievably limited experience with stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I can still watch, a Roman Polanski film from time to time, so Spacey's not going to bother me.
Yeah, fair point.
Man, bear in mind, Roman Polanski should be shot in the head as a
Oh
person,
yeah.
but I can still consume his product in some respects and not be terribly off put. But yeah, I don't have really enough good things to say about this. Enough anything else that I could really say good about this movie. It's all of it is really good. There's not really anything. I can't think of anything in this movie that doesn't work. The closest I got was him encountering French girl with baby, and they thankfully they brought that. They did just enough with that to stop me from rolling my eyes. In particular, when she picks up the baby and he asks, what's her name? I don't know. Well, who's her mother? I don't know. Like, this is not her child. And that's enough of a reality addition to what could have been a very stereotypical kind of scene or interaction.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of that I really like that scene and the way it played out, and I think it functioned as kind of a nice little respite before we kind of dove into the rest of the third act. The only thing I thought that it was coming to was it kind of reminded me of for those of you who are familiar with Band of Brothers, episode 7, Baston, where the medic Doc Rowe befriends a Belgian nurse, and it kind of had that kind of nature of interaction, but I kind of enjoyed it. It was a little Deus Ex Machina that he happened to have that thing of milk in his canteen, but
A little, but again, that's one of those things that I think was included as much for like symbolic value as for anything else. Given,
definitely. And I'm pretty sure he's glad he got rid of that thing because I'm sure there's no way in hell you're getting the smell of that milk out of there.
yeah, and that milk that was like unpasteurized milk straight from the cow. Like that's only keeping for a day or so.
Oh yeah.
I can't say enough good things about this movie. It's It is more so than the way you might necessarily think of a traditionally great movie. It is an astonishing achievement of technical filmmaking that it works the way it does, that it's shot the way it's shot, that it's put together the way it's put together. I mean, again, the editing to make this look like a single take is remarkable. Just an astonishing bit of filmmaking all the way around from all parties involved in this. I can't endorse this movie enough. This is a great movie. If this doesn't win Best Picture, I will be very surprised.
I'm kind of in that same way. I mean, for any listeners out there who are in any form of junior education, probably in high school, I'm gonna bet within the next few years you're probably gonna see this at least once during a substitute teacher day for a history lesson. It kind of strikes me as that kind of movie. That all said, and kind of calling the tea kettle black. In about 10 years, when my kids are old enough and they want to know about the First World War, this is probably going to be a go-to movie for me.
Yeah. There's a shockingly small number of like great World War I movies. I think culturally we're much happier talking about World War II because it's so much easier to kind of like narratively paint good guys and bad guys.
Well, and I think perceptively people just think, oh yeah, it's a bunch of guys standing around in a trench. And depending on where you go and when you go, it did have it could be a kinetic war.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I can only think of. Granted, I haven't actually seen War Horse, so I have to acknowledge that might be an omission on my part. I can only think of a couple of like, World War I movies that exist, much less that are really really good.
I can name. I actually had this exact conversation with somebody at work today, and I think the three we came across, or two we came across, and I just thought of a third one, are Past the Glory, All's Quiet on the Western Front, which is a pretty seminal anti-war movie, and the other one I can think of was the Mel Gibson movie Gallipoli.
Yeah, that was on my list. I'm surprised you left off Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, see, that's one of those ones where you always forget that it's World War One.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Like, oh no, but a lot of people forget that hey, the Ottoman Empire was a thing up
Oh
until
yeah.
post
Well, I mean,
World War One, actually, when it was broken up.
yeah, and that's who the Australians were fighting Gallipoli was. They were trying to land in Turkey.
Yeah. Uh, Boy, what a catastrophic failure of a military operation that was.
Oh yeah. Oh
On
yeah.
the plus side, it did get Winston Churchill to actually be a soldier after he had to resign his commission for that, and
Yeah,
his subsequent experiences in the rest of the war wound up shaping who he was as a politician in World War II.
and unfortunately, he never lost that penchant for really crazy ideas. It never turned out all that well.
And if you know how to use that properly, then at least if
And if
properly
you have enough
channeled,
people,
that's a great thing.
and with enough people to tell you, no, sir, that's a horrible idea. Stop it.
Yeah, but yeah, Gallipoli's in. You mentioned that one with Mel Gibson. Yeah, I'm really at a loss for anything other than the ones we've talked about already. Which is a shame because World War One's a very interesting conflict.
It is. It is. The only other one I can name as just existing as a World War One movie is the Canadian movie Passchendaele. It, for lack of a better word, I'm sorry, Paul Gross, you're a patriot. I love a lot of your stuff, but you kind of Titanic that movie.
Okay, no, you know what? I have one more that not a great movie, but kind of an honorable mention since we're talking about what World War One meant technologically. Much as I hate James Franco, Flyboys is not bad.
Yeah, there actually are a couple of good ones about there are a couple of good ones about the fighter end of things. There was one actually the Germans put one out a few years ago about
Wasn't there a
the
Red
Red
Baron
Baron.
biopic?
Yeah, there's a Red Baron biopic, and it actually had I want to say it was one of the Fiennes brothers playing Roy Brown who shot him down.
Might have. I remember that one has. Oh, who's that German actor? Crap, he plays Hugo Stieglitz in Inglourious Bastards.
Let me see if I can look this up.
I can't remember his name, but he's in that, and he plays the Red
Yeah, the
Baron's
Red
best
Baron.
friend.
He didn't play. Wait a second. The best friend. He wasn't who I think it was it?
I think it was one of the other fighter pilots.
Yeah,
No,
Till
it was
Schweiger.
a hilarious bit of miscasting because he was almost 40, I think, when they shot it, and the guy playing Richtofen is 20 years his junior, and they're supposed to be peers.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Joseph Fiennes who played Captain Roy Brown. Yeah, Matthias Schweighöfer as
It's
as
Schweiger, Till Schweiger.
Lena
That's it.
Headley's in it as I guess the love interest. Till Schweiger as
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking
Werner
of.
Voss. Notably, they did omit one person who was actually in the Red Baron's squadron, who would have been, and of course now I'm forgetting his name. Oh God, Hermann Goering.
You almost forgot Goering.
Well, they omitted it from this movie, I think, probably for reasons since it was a German production. But Hermann Goering was in Richthofen's squadron.
And yeah, for those of you who might not know why I'm kind of surprised you forgot who Goering was. Became a much more infamous character in World War II.
Oh yeah. Though God knows by that war he sure as hell wasn't fitting in a cockpit.
No, he was not. He got chunky. Played very capably by oh crap, who played him in Nuremberg?
Oh, Brian Cox.
Brian Cox, that's it.
Yes. Yeah, that was you're thinking of the one with Alec Baldwin in it, right?
Yeah, Alec Baldwin's in that as
Yep.
the lead prosecutor, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, so that was a miniseries if I remember. That was great.
Yeah, on TNT, I believe. Yeah, that was a really good one. Anyway, now that you've heard us kind of ramble on, let's move on to Let's move on. I do not have the appropriate sound bites. I apologize. But moving on to the money.
In the money? Who's in the money?
1917 was shot on a budget of between $90 and $100 million, somewhere in there. Thus far, worldwide, it's sitting at $72 million. It went into wide release last weekend. Debuted at number 1 here in the United States, pulling in $37 million. It dethroned Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, which dropped from 1 to 2 with only $15 million. For the record, worldwide, Rise of Skywalker has now limped across the $1 billion mark. I almost feel like that's a pity billion, you know? Like, everybody knows that movie's not good, but we really would like it to get there.
I enjoyed it, but we're not having that discussion right now.
I'm just saying. Rise of Skywalker is getting that pity business. Oh, you tried so hard. We feel bad for you. Jumanji: The Next Level fell from 2 to 3. Like a Boss debuted at number 4. Just Mercy went into wider release. Went from 30 to number 5. This is the Michael B. Jordan and Brie Larson
Jamie
pretend
Foxx
to be real people. Little Women fell from 3 to number 6. Underwater, the Kristen Stewart, Vincent Cassel horror movie. This thing kind of bombed. Debuted at number 7, just $7 million. That's a shame. Frozen fell from 4 to 8. That thing's dropped. Knives Out fell from 7 to 9. Spies in Disguise fell from 6 to 10. The Grudge, I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but yet another remake of The Grudge, fell from 5 to 11. Uncut Gems, the Adam Sandler Oscar bait movie, fell from 8 to 12. Bombshell 9 to 13. Parasite Parasite rose 1 from 15 to 14. And I could not pronounce this movie. I'm going to try. Where is that I? I'm going to go with Saralu Nikovaru, which is an Indian film. Debuted at number 15. Going further, we have Ford v Ferrari at 16. Cats, which continues to crater at 17. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood at 18. Queen and Slim 19. And
I just go with Chip Hack.
I think the CHH there is actually where's this from?
I think it's FIP. Let's see what this is.
Saying from from Malta?
Chehapak, maybe? I don't.
I mean, again, like if this is more Yiddish, I know it's like huh, but I don't know. I'm going to apologize. I don't know how to pronounce that. Further down, we have more of the usual stuff that's now dropping. Oh, there's a 4th Ip Man. Can't imagine.
Yeah,
why,
it just came out. It was a heavy advertisement, or maybe this is on my YouTube feed because it knows the stuff I like. But
yeah, following further down, we have a lot of stuff that got dropped out of the top 20. Again, Ip Man, Jojo Rabbit, Richard Jewell, etc., etc. So that was the last weekend. As things stand on the year, sorry, I have to look up 19 in film. So, well, let's start with 19 because this is where things are going to move. It is still nothing like this is still the year of the mouse, like just the real year of the mouse. Avengers Endgame still $2.79 billion, followed by Lion King. Frozen 2 up to third now, $1.3 billion. Spider-Man: Far From Home. I don't know if you saw the trailer for Morbius the Living Vampire.
I did.
But that whole thing, like, hey, from the studio that brought you these Spider-Man movies. Like, no, buddy. That is not accurate at all.
And just to prove it, here's Michael Keaton.
Yeah, that movie would be an absolute hard pass from me if I didn't have to review it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe somebody at Sony finally has some good filmmaking mojo rubbing off on them, but I don't think we're that lucky.
Look, they cast Jared Leto. There's clearly not a lot of mojo there.
Well, you require someone to look creepy. You got Jared Leto, you're set.
I'm going to rip off another content creator, and if anyone happens to get the reference, you get a kudo. Look, they could have, for what they paid Jared Leto, they could have got Tekashi 6ix9ine out of prison to do cameos, like, and you'd have just as much a creepy looking person. So anyway, Spider-Man 1.13 billion, Captain Marvel 1.12, Toy Story 4 1.07, Joker, Aladdin at number 8, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker again barely crossed the $1 billion. They're currently at 1,707,423. So again, just barely over the $1 billion mark. And bringing up the rear, limping along, Hobbs and Shaw at 758 million. As for the new year that we find ourselves in now, 2020, not a lot has happened yet. And I'm not sure where they're... I'm honestly not entirely sure where they're going to put 1917 for... Because it did release in... It did release in more limited capacity in 2019, but for 2020 thus far, very small numbers at the moment. Number 1 for 2020 right now is something called Tolo Tolo, which I know nothing about, sitting at a whopping 41 million, followed by Sony's remake of The Grudge, 29 million. Darbar, yeah, a lot of foreign stuff right now. Underwater at number 5, which again did not do well. The Gentleman, 14 million. Like a Boss, Doolittle. Boy, that thing kind of bombed.
Yeah,
it
that
might have
one.
its wide release coming up this week, but
It is wide releasing this week, but man, that thing definitely kind of struck me as a bit of a. That doesn't look great, and then they're releasing it in mid-January. It's not going to be good.
They're hedging on there not being viable competition, I think. Because this thing had a budget, the reported budget for that movie is $175 million.
Holy moly.
Well, you got to think about just how much CGI gets to go into all those animals, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess this will be the second major bomb for a movie called Doolittle.
I'm not sure what that's in reference to.
No, there was another, there was a Hollywood musical back in like the 1970s at the tail end of the remaining kind of musical fad, and all the exact same problems, except you then also had apparently a leading man who was very difficult to work with, and it bombed hard.
I know that movie. I think I've seen it once or twice. Because yeah, the actor in that is the same guy who plays the lead in the that musical version of My Fair Lady, right?
Yes.
His name completely escapes me at the moment, but I can see his face in my head.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I want to say Richard Harris, but I could be very wrong on that one.
No,
I know
it's
he
not
was.
Richard Harris.
He was involved in another one of those where it.
Hang on.
1967.
Rex Harrison.
Yeah, Rex Harrison. Yep.
Different Harrison. Similar, but an R. Oof. Yeah, that thing had a. Bear in mind, this was released in
67.
1967. Had a budget of $17 million and only took in 9 at the box office. That is terrible.
Yeah, and this basically had there were reshoots, there was all sorts of different things, and it just bombed hard.
Yeah, and this one, oof. Yeah, they're banking hard on Robert Downey Jr. having star power, which has not been documented outside of him being Tony Stark. There's also... Wait a minute, what? How did I miss this? There's another Lupin the Third movie that's been released in 2020. Good for them. So again, the year, of course, 2020, still very, very young. And I imagine, again, Dolittle might be a bit of a bomb.
It's sitting at 12% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and for some reason, Bad Boys for Life is being positively reviewed. And I don't know what to do about that. But yeah, next week we'll have, again, next week is going to be the real test of January. We have Dolittle, we have Bad Boys for Life. I can't even make, the sad thing about Bad Boys for Life, I can't even make a Michael Bay joke. Because he's not directing it.
He's not?
Nope.
I thought he was.
It's sure, look, there are good filmmakers who inspire copycats, and then there are bad filmmakers who inspire copycats, and Michael Bay is the latter.
Yeah.
Next week, we'll have Dolittle, Bad Boys for Life, and Last Full Measure.
Oh, and it's written by Joe Carnahan. Come on, Joe Carnahan. You were better than this at some point.
What, Bad Boys for Life?
Yes.
He's got a minor credit attached to it. He probably did just a bit of. Hang on, was he ever actually better than this?
Joe Carnahan?
Hang on.
He did Smoking Aces, which I liked. He did The Grey, which I thought was really underrated, and I laughed a lot during the A-Team remake.
I liked the A-Team movie. I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun with that. He did Pride and Glory, which could have been so much better. Wasn't bad, but could have been so much better. Oh, he wrote the 2018 Death Wish.
Ooh.
Or at least he got a writing credit on it. Okay.
Yeah. The Grey, though, is pretty significant.
Yeah, I enjoyed The Grey. So, yeah. And I imagine one of those will probably wind up having a good run. Yeah, there's just not a lot in January as usual. February is going to kick off with Birds of Prey, followed by Sonic the Hedgehog. Oh, did you get the Call of the Wild trailer ahead of this movie?
No, I did not. I have seen it, though.
Oh, that
the one with Harrison Ford and the dog, right?
Yeah, that dog looks so painfully CGI'd.
Have you seen the meme about that one?
No, I haven't.
So it's a picture of Harrison Ford on the dog, and it says, when the shrooms finally wear off and you realize you haven't been an intergalactic pilot racing around the universe with a Wookiee.
You're just an old man in Alaska with a St. Bernard?
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty good. But yeah, it's January and February and March. I don't know what to tell you guys. It's kind of a dead zone. What do we have for March actually? Hang on. We have Onward, which is the new Pixar movie.
Even that one doesn't look great to me. I don't know if I quite buy the premise of it. The
second trailer did more for me than the first one.
It did, but it hasn't caught me up like a lot of their other ones have.
I think it was something about the second trailer that I kind of like. There's the old joke. There's now the old joke about Pixar movies, like Toy Story 3. The subtitle just "Yeah, you're gonna cry."
Yeah, exactly.
For the record, I did bawled my eyes out. I can see kind of where I think Onward's going to hit me in the feels.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm looking forward to that. We don't really pick off as far as quality or anticipated releases until the end of March, where Quiet Place 2 will be released. And for the record, I saw the trailer for that finally, and I would pass on that one.
I was only to see the first one.
The first one's good. It's really good. The trailer for the second one, gives me a lot of the indicators of sequel that I don't think needs to be made and is going to take things in a awkward direction. And then the end of March we get, I think, the big release that, well, they're going to hope it's the big release at least, with the live action Mulan.
You know what? That one I legitimately am looking forward to. That looks like that's something where you could do a lot of interesting things with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a fan of the the Asian war epic. So if they go, and this is not a musical, so if they go a bit more that way, you could have a lot of great visuals that come out of this. And then once we get into April, we finally are getting the New Mutants, in theory. The new James Bond movie, of course. Then we're just kind of off and running at that point.
Oh yeah. How excited are you for Tenet?
I am very excited. Christopher Nolan is one of those guys who I will see his movies regardless of anything else. Like, just
Oh yeah.
Hey, Christopher Nolan made a movie, I'm there.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, it's kind of interesting, like the movie that, going back to 1917 for a second, the movie this kind of made me realize, comparing and contrast again, is Dunkirk, which is a brilliant movie.
That movie was sadly underappreciated when it came out. Dunkirk is excellent.
Oh yeah, Dunkirk's excellent. I would actually maybe rate this as a little bit better.
I might as well. I can agree with that.
I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, Dunkirk kind of played with time, and this movie kind of plays with scope.
Yeah. Both of which are really interesting things to see played around with like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, again, that's kind of what we have coming up. Again, next week, I believe next week we'll have Bad Boys for Life, as well as, I have to double check the schedule. But I believe next week will be Bad Boys for Life, and with, I think, Last Full Measure also in there. I wanted to see that, and we do have it on another Wednesday show that Mark and I will be doing, so I'm going to make him see one of them. He's making me see Bad Boys for Life, which, I'm not going to lie, guys, I may not live through.
It's gonna be really long. It's gonna be really loud. It's gonna just, yeah.
I have actually seen the first two Bad Boys movies, believe it or not. And I saw them when I was a teenager with my dad. We actually rented them. And 20 years younger me didn't like those movies when I was kind of part of the target audience for them. Yeah.
The good news is this one's like a half hour shorter than Bad Boys 2.
Well, look, Bad Boys 2 stretched the laws of time because it never actually ended.
Yeah.
It's still going on somewhere.
The only good thing about Bad Boys 2 is the following piece of dialogue. Super Cop or Bad Boys 2? Which one do you think I would prefer? No, which one do you want to watch first?
Yeah, in all seriousness, the true, like, if you ever doubt the genius of Hot Fuzz as a movie, it lifts a direct quote from Bad Boys 2 and makes it actually work in context within the movie.
I think it lifts several lines from Bad Boys 2.
Yeah, don't see Bad Boys. See Hot Fuzz instead.
Yeah. Hot Fuzz is a better version of the movie that Bad Boys wants to be.
Yeah. Boy, is that accurate. All right, that will bring us to everyone's favorite bit, where we get to talk about how terrible critics are at their jobs. Now, at the moment, 19 sits at 90%. The website will wake up. It sits at 90% via critics. It's an 89% audience score. You know what? Audience and critics, you managed to line up. You got it right, more or less. Thank you for that. Okay, so let us have a look at the critics.
Okay, one quick question of format here. How do we want to do this in
Oh,
terms
I'll just
of?
read them, and then if you have something you'd rather say first, I'm happy to give you first shot at any of these. So
Okay, sounds good.
let's see. Where do we want to start with this? Oh man, there's a bunch of these that are even like fresh that I want to tear apart. um, okay, here. Let's start with this one then. Tom Schoen from the Sunday Times UK. If you've seen our corporal dashing down a battlefield perpendicular to an infantry charge, evading exploding mines, that's artillery shelling, you moron. And mortars as he goes, weren't even mortars. Mortars weren't a thing in World War I, really. And relied on technological advances that took place later. You've pretty much seen the extent of its climax, which is an asinine take on the actual climax of this movie.
Yeah, this is pretty inane. I mean, you can talk about. I mean, in realism, I mean, what? There's maybe three action scenes in the entire movie, but no, a lot of this is about the tension that it builds, the way that it keeps you on the edge of your seat throughout the movie and keeps you engaged with the characters. I mean, I'm sorry, no.
Um, Peter Canaves from Groucho Reviews attempts to thread the needle of a moving anti-war film in that narrow space between war as thrill ride and the filmic wizardry that, when examined too closely, rings as hollow as a war machine wrapped with a wrench. How is that an appropriately composed sentence? Moreover, this is not an... Here's a really controversial sentiment. This is not an anti-war movie, you moron. I get that, from a cultural and a societal standpoint, you don't want to overly glamorize war, lest people. There's that quote from, I forget who said it. Might have been George Washington. But it is good that war is so terrible, lest men grow too fond of it. And that's true, and I think we did spend too much time, not just as the human species, kind of glamorizing war as something other than what it is. But not every movie about that subject material is anti-war. I think that's a real misread of this film.
And I would say, I mean, it was interesting. I was actually just listening to another podcast called Friendly Fire, which is kind of dedicated to war movies, and they just reviewed Das Boot, and they said, isn't it kind of ironic that even though people make anti-war movies, the kinetic nature of war still ends up kind of glorifying it anyway?
There's that, and I'm of the opinion, as far as this goes, that war and conflict like that does, and this is not to diminish the human suffering, which is very, very real, but it does in a lot of people bring out the best in them, that kind of adversity. And there are always testaments to the resilience and triumph of the human spirit in war, and it's very easy to find them. It's very easy to find the reverse. It's very easy to find people who sink to the depths of depravity. And anytime you wind up telling those kinds of stories, even something like Platoon, or I think the supreme irony of this, like Full Metal Jacket, which Stanley Kubrick absolutely intended to be a lampooning of not just the Vietnam War in particular, but a lot of what is somewhat erroneously referred to as the military-industrial complex. Like, he wanted to demystify so much of that and you would not believe how many people came out of 1917 and said, you know what? I'm going to sign up for the Marine Corps.
You mean Full Metal Jacket?
Yeah.
Oh, quick aside. So, for years I was involved with the Air Cadet program up here in Canada, and when I was a staff cadet, you could not talk to cadets this way, but God knows, for us who were on staff, Arlie Ermy was a goddamn hero.
You know the story of how he got that role, right?
I've never heard that. I've heard everything he did was improv. I've never heard the story.
Okay, yes, it was improv. Emery was not originally cast in that role. He was just the military advisor for the picture. But the guy they had cast as the drill instructor, or instructors army and drill sergeants are military are army, drill instructors are Marine Corps. The guy they had as the drill instructor couldn't really get it. Because drill instructors have a very cadenced way that they speak, and given that Arlie Emery was a drill instructor for the Marine Corps, he kept trying to get this guy to do it right, and eventually Kubrick just said, well, why don't you have a shot at it? and again, that entire scene is essentially him improving, because that's just the kind of things he would say and do to new recruits. And it was very, very typical of what went on in the Marine Corps at that period in time. Okay. Here we have another negative review. Pete Vonder Haar from the Houston Press. By relying on technique over most everything else, Mendes takes the focus from the characters where it truly belongs. You, sir, are steeped in a nearly postmodernist conception of what filmmaking is and how it should be done. Because this is profoundly inaccurate.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, can you say the characters in some cases are a little bit shallow? Yeah, sure. But I mean, on the flip side of it, you can use film to tell a variety of different things. Sometimes you can tell a movie that's character driven. Sometimes you can tell a movie that's plot driven. This is a movie that is experience driven.
Yeah, the notion that all movies have to be done a certain way it's profoundly inaccurate. Oh, okay, here we go. Richard Brody, top critic, writing for The New Yorker. May as well be written on toilet paper. While Mendes doesn't shrink from displaying the vivid imagination of a suburban horn dog, he's unwilling to face the imagination of the valorous combatants of 1917. Wow.
May I?
Please. I am just drowning in the... I am drowning in the... this man short-circuited my brain.
Yeah,
I'm
this guy's
the
basically...
pretension of that paragraph.
Yeah. Okay, Sean Comer, I hope you're out there, buddy, because this use of this word is for you. But, dude, Keska, fuck. Seriously. How is any of this actually a valid criticism of this movie? Suburban Horn Dog. I don't see anything that really inspired that feeling in this movie. Yeah. Unwilling to face the imagination of the valorous combatants. I don't even know what the hell that's supposed to mean. I mean, I think it was interesting. I thought one of the things the movie did really right was pull in some of that imagination, pull in some of those personal touches. Like when you go into the trenches or when you go into the German trenches, there's graffiti all over the place, which is one of the things that these guys did.
Yeah,
for
those of you who don't know, they would actually leave because so much of trench warfare was like one series of trenches to the next. They would leave notes to each other.
Yeah, another quick aside. This is the wrong movie to keep me focused on. So one of the things I got right in the movie was the fact that this specific part of France had a lot of chalk in it. That's why there was so much white ground. Prior to the one battle at Vimy Ridge, a lot of the soldiers were housed in these big caverns made of chalk. And about 10 years ago, they started digging these out, and they started to find there were a bunch of guys who went in there and actually, put in really elaborate carvings. They carved in unit tabs. They carved in all kinds of stuff. As it turns out, my mom actually went to work with somebody whose grandfather did one of those carvings. So I mean, yeah, this one sentence out of this one review makes my head hurt in a significant way.
Yeah, that almost seems like it was badly translated from another language. Okay, here we have another one. Oh, God. Once again, this makes my head hurt. David Harris from Spectrum Culture. We're supposed to spend the entire film/journey with just 2 British soldiers. But do we really care about them? Nah. I have nothing to say to you, sir, about how profoundly... I'm like 60% robot, and I'm still able to understand the connections and make inferences rather than have to have one guy sit down and spell out his genealogical tree and all the aspirations he's had dating back to the time he was a 5-year-old kid on his mother's... no. You don't need all that, and the fact that you think you do is just pathetic.
You nailed that one. Okay, I need
This is an interesting one. In no small part because this is from a rotten review, but I think this raises an interesting point, if nothing else. Ryan Gilby from The New Statesman. Audiences who should be absorbed by the physical challenges inherent in the soldier's mission are likely to be instead thinking of the technical ones faced by the filmmakers. Now, partially, I'm not sure how accurate that is to the individual experience of watching the movie. I don't know about you, but as someone who has more than once had to push a vehicle out of being stuck in either snow or mud, I have a deep admiration for all of those guys being able to physically move. Like, I was physically tensing up during that scene where they're pushing that truck out of that hole, because I know what that takes physically. But in that said, I do think there might be a bit of a point here in that this movie is very much, in some respects, a showcase for the technical acumen of all the people involved. And I don't mean to say that other movies aren't. They are, but the way this one is shot and constructed, it does become a bit more noticeable relative to, say, the average Tarantino film.
I think I think you're right. I think there's a little bit of point when I need to go back and rewatch it again because I definitely watched it with a little bit of a critical hat on, a little bit of a war buff hat on. So maybe I was thinking a little bit about that because I was just stunned by how well it was put together. So I don't know if I was quite as sucked in as I was by other movies, but I mean, I think you're right. It still works as a base level as both a movie and then also as a technical exercise.
Okay, here we go. Joshua Rivera from The Verge. 1917 is a solemn war movie with popular appeal, the kind of thing that makes awards nominations guaranteed, but it's also hollow, lacking the emotional heart that makes the genre more than empty spectacle. Buddy, I am not entirely sure where to begin with you. I'm sorry, do you need to spend, an hour with Giovanni Ribisi before he's shot trying to take a sniper nest? And that is something that might get to you? Are you only moved by, Tom Hanks on the side of a bridge after you've spent 2.5 hours with him in a Spielberg epic? If you're not moved by both Blake's death, and then again, for me, more so, when Schofield has to deliver that news to his brother, I'm mostly robot. If that doesn't speak to the emotional nature of what's going on here, or, just Schofield breaking down on the bank of a river after literally having to crawl over a pile of corpses to get out of the water. I don't know how you can watch... I don't know how we could have come to such wildly disparate conclusions about the same film?
Well, I mean, even when you get into even when you get into that scene afterwards and you see, right after Blake dies and the two guys show up and they carry him and he goes through the process of pulling off his buddy's personal effects and his identity markers. They weren't called dog tags at the time, but identity discs and things like that. And, how can you not feel that?
I don't know. This is the same person who was probably like just a wreck after 5 minutes of a marriage story. I don't know what to. Oh God. Okay, this. Walter Chaw of Film Freak Central. Making a hollow spectacle of war is ignoble. Sometimes it's dangerously irresponsible. Well, don't you just want to try and get invited to all the parties? Like, how do you consider this a hollow spectacle? If anything, its narrow focus emphasizes the humanity. You miserable, miserable moron.
Can I throw one out there for you?
By all means.
Christian M. Lynn of Fort Worth Weekly. It's a war film for fans of Downton Abbey. As such, it works splendidly. That doesn't make 1917 a great film.
Oh, that
I will
pains me.
I will have you know, miss. I think this is both a great war film, and I'm a fan of Downton Abbey. So bite me.
I am not a fan of Downton Abbey. I don't know why you would even make that comparison. Is it because they're both set in roughly the same time period and have a detail to production design?
Well, it's weird because so the second season actually deals pretty extensively with the First World War, and it's like, yeah, this is about one of the most sterile versions of the First World War I've seen. 1917 was not that.
Okay, this idiot. Sean Burns of the Artery, excuse me. And for the record, yes, art is all in capitals, because it's a real professional outfit.
Are you sure the E is not actually a 3?
It is not represented as such here. I cannot speak to the actual site as I will not click on it. It's cinema as a VR headset, with all the expressive qualities of the art replaced by a dull literal-mindedness, a quote-unquote immersive trip during it. You can just put the quotes in. You're writing this, you moron. Trip into an unconvincing verisimilitude that makes a lousy substitute for drama. You don't know what drama is, you painfully ignorant buffoon.
That's a $10 review. That's a $10 word for a $2 review.
Yeah, like, oh God. Here's a real simple way of trying to think about what drama is. A lot of people talk about how drama is the essence of conflict. It's conflict. It's humans interacting, and while there is some truth to that, I think there's a much simpler way to consider it, especially if you're writing. If you want drama in your story, here's a real simple way to figure out if you have it or not. At any point in time, does your reader ever, or your watcher, whatever, do they ever ask themselves the question, will the heroes ... You spend this entire movie genuinely wondering if our heroes will complete their mission. It's not a whole lot more complicated than that. I don't need a protracted scene where these two where our two characters get into a debate, or I just want to go home. Why does everyone seem to think that you can only have a great war movie if there's a scene where some soldier dies, and as they're dying, they're expressing all of your personal worldview about why are we even here? I just want to go home, etc., etc., etc. There's loose aside. There was a review of a movie called They Were Soldiers, which is a really good movie.
Are you thinking about the Mel Gibson one?
Yeah.
That was a great. We Were Soldiers. Yeah, that's a great one.
We Were Soldiers, excuse me. Yeah, great movie based on an even better book. If you have
Agreed.
the time and the mind for reading that kind of thing. And one of the reviewers, this sticks in my mind. I can't remember who it was, but they actually said this in their review of it. I hope we had moved beyond the image of a soldier, saying, "I'm glad I could die for my country." Like, as though it never crossed this pedantic pencil pusher's mind that actually was that young man's last spoken word. The very notion of that actually being true is so anathema to their worldview that they immediately dismiss it out of hand. For the record, the soldier in question, those were his reported last words. People do actually think that way. Not everybody. I'm not saying war is a glamorous adventure. It's not. But can we not pretend that your narrow worldview is all there is?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's as valid and as true as something like, the touch I liked in this movie was Schofield and his little, what I actually thought was a cigarette case, and it might have been a cigarette case, but the case where he kept a picture of his family, and he wasn't going around and looking at it and showing it off to all the guys, but he needed that little piece of his humanity kept, so he had that.
Okay, here we have a historical ignoramus as well as a generalized brain-damaged person. Alistair Ryder of the Digital Fix. If Mendes made 1917 without the gimmickry, he could have made something special that effectively honored the true story. Instead, this is a mere technical exercise that everybody will forget about as soon as award season is over. Yeah, the true story. Because all of these people... This is why I like when we get to do stuff like this, because we actually talk about, okay, none of these were actually real people, and the event in question is somewhat historically inaccurate, is not depicted historically accurately, but here's the reasons why they didn't, and here's why it's okay. And this Joker, if he'd not gone for the gimmickry, he could have told the true story. Buddy, you don't know enough to know what the true story is.
Oh, exactly, and I mean, I think your comment on these and comment on all these reviews are pretty on point. Where it's like, can these guys not go beyond the fact that you need to be spoon-fed, place, context, everything, and you can't just accept that you're being dropped into a story. You're going to follow those characters. You don't need to know every single detail. And this is a self-professed nerd saying this. Noah Berlansky, and I think that one might actually just end it for us tonight.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, NBC News and Think.
Oof.
In 1917, creators used their enormous technical talent to rationalize and justify an irrational, unjustifiable war.
Oh,
get him, Robert.
Okay. I'm going to once again say, you historical ignoramus. Let's set aside the technical inaccuracies, all right? Let's just talk for 1 minute or two here about the reality of war, okay? You're one of these people who would have been ceding land to Adolf Hitler in some weak-minded attempt to justify, well, no, nothing could be worse than another war. Let's just give him this land. Who cares what he does? No. No. Let's talk about World War I in particular here. Do you all not know how that came about? Do you not understand the sequence of events that led to Germany invading France the way it did? Do you not necessarily understand, what some of the heroism of the very small British expeditionary force that was stationed in and around Normandy that actually halted the German advance after they went through Belgium?
If you want to, go listen to TV Party Tonight on Our World War, which happened last year on the Rhode Island Broadcasting Network.
I am not saying that war should be sought. It shouldn't. But this notion that war is completely avoidable is ignorant of humanity and how human beings work. It's completely ahistorical, and is nothing. You've now done this as nothing more than an attempt to foist your own worldview onto a movie. Just really briefly as an aside, I can't remember the book, and I apologize for that because I wish I could list it for you. But there was a book where I believe it's a history professor. It's been so long since I've read it. But one of the arguments that is put forth in this book is essentially that in the contemporary world, we think about and we are taught about war incorrectly.
Is it John Keegan?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, because he takes the opposite view of war as policy by any means, which is what Clausewitz posited. I don't 100% agree with Keegan, but he's got some interesting stuff.
Yeah,
and his book on World War One is excellent.
Yeah, but I liked the kind of generalized point that is raised that nations, mind you, inherently come into conflict with other nations. And war is the more natural state of nations than peace. Again, I'm not sure how much I agree with that, but there is a valid observation there, if nothing else. And we nowadays think of war as what happens when everything goes wrong. In reality, war is historically, at least, much more likely than peace. And to pretend that every war ever waged is unjustifiable and ignoble and it is historically inaccurate. It is disingenuous to essentially the whole of human history on a scope that I scarcely can wrap my head around at the moment. So thanks for that, you blithering jackass.
I'm gonna get in on this one too.
Please.
And let's go for a moment. Let's at least accept the part of the premise of the argument that World War I was at least irrational, which if you've read something like Margaret Macmillan's The War That Ended Peace, excellent book, she makes a very good case that it was avoidable, but it was avoidable by rational people, but we weren't dealing with 100% rational people on any side of the given argument. To the movie itself?
I'd honestly argue that World War I was somewhat inevitable, especially once a handful of the old guard aged out.
She actually makes a lot of that point where it was talking about the personalities involved, that some of the safeties had been taken away, and she had also made a point that by the end of what was called the Long Peace, which is preceded the World War I, there had been so much built up tension that society at large decided to take, and I believe I'm almost directly quoting here, a great leap into the dark.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knew that that there was going to be a war for like 20 years before it happened.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there had been a couple of close calls where it nearly happened, but I mean,
there was that one. Wasn't there that like conflict between France and England in their African colonies?
Well, I think you're thinking about Germany and England and South Africa, the Boer War.
Yeah, no. There was actually one like more in northern Africa where I think it was the French and the English, like because they had they were both like vying for control over part of and could very easily have kicked off.
It very
World
much
War
could
I,
have
with very different players involved.
Yeah, I mean there had been minor skirmishes in the Balkans and things like that had been going on. So I mean, there is a lot of indicators that something.
Again. I think something like 20 to 30 years before World War I kicked off, when just kind of addressing the state of tensions in Europe, He said he was like asked, "Well, what's gonna start it?" And his response was some damn stupid thing in the Balkans, probably.
Yeah, I remember that one too. Um, but anyways, going back to this jackass's comments, um, I don't see there's anything in the movie that justifies or rationalizes the war itself. Because I mean,
Yeah,
Rob,
there is no argument about the morality of either side, really,
yeah, I
apart from
mean,
a
there's
couple
no
of
like,
soldiers griping, which
there's
soldiers
no,
do.
none of these guys are walking around talking about. Are you familiar with John Bull?
I think I've heard the name, but I couldn't say more than that.
John Bull is basically the UK's version of Uncle Sam.
Okay.
So I don't think he's used anymore, but at the time, like, they're not talking about Lord Kitchener. They're not talking about John Bull. They're not, talking about King and Empire here or anything like that. They're talking about literally trying to stop a few guys from dying. And nobody, like, does it look like anybody in this movie is enjoying this war at all? Everybody's exhausted. I mean, you get the read early on with Schofield that they mentioned he's been in the Psalm, so he's been there for the better part of a year at least. So all these guys have been there. Everyone's exhausted, and this doesn't make that argument that they're justifying this war. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah, the fact that it is not actively decried at every turn does not mean it is being espoused as some great moral virtue. Okay, I hate
to say
here.
The trip through
Good.
The trip to no man's land basically justifies no war.
Yeah, really. All right, I have two that I want to read back to back because these are top critics. Gary N. Kramer, writing for Salon.com. Despite the film's salient features, 1917 feels oddly underwhelming. It might succeed in making viewers as exhausted as the characters, but it lacks the emotional punch this story requires to make it a lasting impact. A, that's a badly constructed bit of your final sentence. B, I don't know what else to tell you guys about people saying this movie lacks an emotional punch. There's definitely parts of this movie that resonate emotionally. If they don't resonate with you, I mean, I can't help your own personal biases, but did you want one of the characters to come out as gay and suddenly you'd feel better about it? I don't understand what you're asking of this movie.
Did you want Schofield to pick up Thor's hammer? And I love Endgame, so I'm not knocking Endgame there, but it's like, was that what you were looking for? Because this was, again, let's talk about scale and scope here. This isn't a whole bloody army. This is two guys trying to get from one point to the other. I like the fact there's a little bit of symmetry in this movie, that it starts with Schofield sleeping against a tree and ends with him sleeping against a tree.
Yeah.
Which is also accurate in the case that soldiers can fall asleep damn near anywhere.
You get tired enough, you can sleep anywhere. All right, and we're going to close on this. Peter Sobinsky from RogerEbert.com, top critic. Sitting through it is like watching someone else play a video game for 2 solid hours, and not an especially compelling one at that. I have nothing for you, sir, other than that you should tender your resignation to the site you write for. Just the shame you should feel for having crafted that sentence.
I've seen numerous video game references in these rotten reviews, and it's like, y'all need to go play some more video games then.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I think the closest thing I could come to for a video game comparison to this is actually the most recent God of War.
Really?
For a very specific reason, actually. The most recent God of War, if you never die, has no cuts.
Really?
Yeah. The only time that camera cuts in God of War, again, would be 4, is when your character dies. Other than that, it is presented as a single continuous shot.
That's really cool. I think I might have heard the same thing about, what's it called? Sensuous Sacrifice?
I have not played that one.
It's a smaller game. Apparently, it's really good.
So, point. Yeah, these people know nothing of movies or video games. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, if these guys want a separate, career, what they can do is, go out every year and give the annual release of Call of Duty a 9.5 out of 10.
Look, I'm sure at least half of these people were writing for IGN a few years ago and were responsible for the famous 6.8 out of 10 too much water review of. Anyway.
So
I think
what got
that's going to
6.8
wrap
for
us
too
up
much
then.
water?
Remember, people, those guys were professionals, paid for their jobs. And they're morons. It's just a sad, sad state of affairs. All right, I believe that's going to be just about everything for us. So, Andrew, thank you again very much for being here. Always a pleasure to talk to you. What
Thank you very much, Robert. I'm going to plug where I train at, which is Esteem Martial Arts and Havoc JKD here in Calgary. So Stu actually has a new website, esteemandhavoc.com. So we offer karate, JKD, fit boxing, and jiu-jitsu, as well as Serrata Eskrima. It is a fantastic place to train with incredibly knowledgeable instructors. I highly suggest you come out and train with us. We also are associated with the Jeet Kune Do Athletic Association, whose head, Harinder Singh Sabharwal, is actually on the cover of this month's Black Belt magazine. So I thoroughly suggest you go check that organization and that martial artist out when you get a chance. Other than that, I should also say my instructor, Jay Cooper, actually has his own podcast called Baying of the Hound, which is on YouTube and on, I believe, the app is Anchor.
Yeah, if you're a martial artist, I can unsolicited recommendation. I enjoy Baying of the Hound a great deal, so
I will pass that on to Jay. He'll thoroughly appreciate that.
All right. As for myself, this last Sunday was the first Ground and Pound of the new year. The 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast is back. We had a preview of UFC 246, which will be coming your way on Saturday. That's Donald Cerrone and Conor McGregor. It's not a great card. There's a few decent fights on it. Sadly spaced out inappropriately. So you can listen to Jeff Harris and I give you a full preview of that card. We talk about the news of the week, a couple of weeks actually. And we do kind of a little bit of 2019 in review. If you're interested in my thoughts on the year of 2019 for MMA, my year-end awards, such as they are up in the MMA zone of 411mania.com. If you're so inclined, feel free to stop by, give it a read, disagree with me. If you do, all I ask is that you keep it civil. Feel free to disagree with me. And again, I'll be back next week. I'm pretty sure it's Bad Boys for Life, assuming I do not commit. You know what? I wouldn't kill myself in protest over this movie. I might violently strip in the theater in protest, and so I might be arrested. But
nobody wants to see that, Rob.
I am aware, believe me. But hey, look, if that a couple of Olympics ago, wasn't there a Mongolian wrestling coach who mat side stripped in protest of a judge's call?
He might have.
So there might be something like that in my future. Mark and I will be back for that. As always, again, all of our material will be moving to the W2M network, so you can type that into here wherever you are, wherever you have found us. That's where you'll be. You can find us over there going forward. The content, to the best of my knowledge, will not change. It's still going to be us doing our thing, just a slightly different home. And look forward to seeing you all again in the future. Hope you'll all come back. Until next time, on behalf of the absent Mark Radulich and for Andrew Graham from the Great White North Montana.
Very funny, Robert.
I can't help it. That gag makes me laugh. Okay, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to out. This is one of my favorite gags because so many people don't get it. There's a Disney movie called Meet the Robinsons where the characters go into the future. And in the future, all of Canada has become part of the United States, and it's just one state that is North Montana. And I always get a kick out of referring to Canada as North Montana now.
I live in a city with a population bigger than all of Montana put together.
I'm not sure that's accurate. Wyoming almost certainly, though.
No. I'm looking at it right now. Calgary's at 1.35. All of Montana's at 1.062.
Oh, nice. So you'd just be a very large state. All right, that's going to, again, that will wrap things up for us. Thank you all again, everybody. Be back next week. Until then, stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.